Washington Journal continues.
Tom Lee works for the Sunlight Foundation, tracking the stimulus money, all federal money that's happening right now between the Obama administration and Congress. Let's start with Recovery.gov, the website that the Obama administration started to help viewers track where this stimulus money is going. In general, how do you use this website?
Well, the way that you use the website is going to evolve over the coming months. Right now, you can go to it, you can learn about the Recovery Act, you can learn about how funding is being broken down by agency, by state, and you can start to get an idea of what the money in the Act is going to be used for. It's a vast variety of uses that it's going to be put toward. In the coming months, though, we expect it to become much more detailed. Reporting standards, beginning this week, the agencies that are dispersing funds are going to be reporting at the same level of detail that's currently used on USAspending.gov, which is a site that the public can go to look at pretty much every dollar that comes out of the federal government. Right now, funds are just starting to roll out in relation to stimulus spending. That reporting is going to begin this week, as I said. We expect shortly thereafter it's going to go up on Recovery.gov. There are increased standards, too, though, that are going to provide a level of transparency that hasn't been seen before for recovery spending. That reporting is going to begin in July, and it's going to go an additional layer down, and that will really let people drill into specific projects.
And when you say it's a different level of transparency, give us an example of that.
Right. So the example that's provided in Peter Orzog's memo, providing guidance to agencies on how to implement their Recovery.gov activities, is that in the past, the government might give money to a state, and that would be recorded on USAspending.gov. Now, under the Recovery Act, that state will be obligated to also report on cities that they give the money to. So there's an additional level. Now, the Sunlight Foundation is a member of the Coalition on an Accountable Recovery, which is led by OMB Watch. And we've issued a set of recommendations on revisions to the plan for Recovery.gov. And that includes going further down that rabbit hole. Reporting detailed information on smaller contracts. Right now, for contracts under $500,000, there won't have to be specific information on the contract. We'd like to bring that down to $25,000. And we'd also like to know who that city is giving the money to and who that supplier is giving the money they receive to. Now, obviously, there's a limit to this. We don't need to know who a contractor that's working on bridge construction is buying their toner from. But we do need to have a little bit more transparency, we feel.
Well, what is lacking right now from this website when people go to it?
Well, right now it's hard to say what's ultimately going to be there. We think that, like a lot of the efforts of the new administration, we're taking an optimistic wait-and-see approach. Right now, you can go to the site and you can learn about how the money's being spread around by agency, how it's being spread around by state, as I said. It's still a little sparse, though. The information on Wikipedia about the Recovery Act is significantly better than what you can find on Recovery.gov if you really want to find out what's going to be funded. Now, there's a detailed plan that's going to proceed over the coming months, but we just don't know how it's going to end up. Now, part of this is that the board that's been assigned the role of overseeing Recovery.gov, the unfortunately named RAT board, the Recovery, Accountability, and Transparency Board, they've been holding a dialogue over the last week at the nationaldialogue.org, soliciting ideas for what should go on Recovery.gov, in addition to what's already been planned. And we don't know exactly what they're going to pick and choose from of the submitted ideas, but that will inform what ultimately goes up on the site.
Tom Lee of the Sunlight Foundation is here this morning to help us track this stimulus money, where to go, what to look for on Recovery.gov, as well as their website, Sunlight Foundation. Talk a little bit about the foundation, what you're doing as far as tracking this money.
Sure. Well, the Sunlight Foundation is dedicated to using the Internet to increase government transparency. We really believe that when citizens know what's going on in Washington, government works better, and it fosters trust between citizens and their representatives. So we have a number of projects aimed at improving that level of accountability. Some examples would be the Open Congress project at opencongress.org. That is a joint venture between Sunlight and the Participatory Politics Foundation. I knew I was going to stumble on that. People who are interested can track activity on bills, they can track it by legislators, they can track it on individual votes, and really stay better connected with what's going on in Washington. We also have some projects exploring the connection of money and influence in Washington. One example is Political Party Time, which collects invitations to fundraisers that are held for members of the legislature. Those don't have to be disclosed. It's basically whatever invitations we can get right now. But it's some fascinating information to see who's throwing a party for whom.
All right, on Recovery.gov, let me give the phone numbers to our viewers so they can call in with their questions. If you're a Democrat, 202-737-0002, Republicans, 202-737-0001, and Independents, 202-628-0205. And you can email us as well at journal@cspan.org, and also send us a tweet at twitter.com/cspanwj. Let me ask you about, on Recovery.com, if you go to the top, there are a bunch of tabs at the top. One of them is investments, and as you said, they break down the money by state, by agency, by category. If you break it down by agency, you can see how much money has been made available of the stimulus bill for each agency and how much has actually been paid out thus far. If you go to the Department of Energy, $3.2 billion is available for the Department of Energy. Only $173,000 has been paid out.
Right. This speaks to that question of shovel readiness that was bandied about in the media for a long time. Not every agency is going to have their projects ready to go. We may still be in the planning phases for a lot of these things. So it's still underway. The transportation infrastructure related projects are usually what people point to as the most shovel ready. These are things that have already been in the works. It's hard to say without really drilling into the individual agencies what the holdup is. And this is one of the arguments for the sort of transparency that we're seeking.
All right, let's let our viewers weigh in here. Sioux Falls, South Dakota. John, on the Democrats line, you're on the air with Tom Lee of the Sunlight Foundation. We're talking about tracking those stimulus dollars. What's your question?
My question is, how come they can't track them better? It seems like all this money that's been paid out in the billions to all the banks and Wall Street, and yet we don't see any flow into the general public and to help out to get job stimulus and all that. Where's this money? What is it, just laying there? Well, or is it not being distributed?
Go ahead.
Well, first I should differentiate between the bailout and the recovery. These are two very different programs. I think you were referring to the bailout, which is being undertaken to guarantee financial institutions viability so that we don't have more serious economic problems. You can come to the website that I work on a day-to-day basis, Subsidyscope.com, which is a joint venture between Sunlight and the Pew Charitable Trusts, to track the bailout. We'll be looking at the bailout. We'll then be moving on to the transportation sector, looking at federal subsidies in general. That is hard to track for a number of reasons. Money's fungible. You can't follow its flow that easily once it's been given to one of these institutions. It's also not clear exactly what the government's getting for its money. For instance, a lot of these troubled assets, the basic issue is that we don't know how much they're worth. So when the government's buying them, it's hard to track exactly, what our investment is valued at. That's something that Subsidyscope aims to improve. Now, as far as recovery spending, the stimulus bill, hardly it's just that it's early days. This is going to be improved. The plan is to have reporting that goes down as far as possible. There are real hurdles to getting contractors to report back exactly how they're using the money.
All right, let's get another phone call in here from Debbie in Fort Myers, Florida, on the Independent line. You're on the air with Tom Lee. Debbie, what's your question about this stimulus money?
Oh, hi. I appreciate somebody looking into getting this stuff more transparent. But my question is, the real money is not this stuff going through Congress. It's the money going through the Federal Reserve. They just printed $2.2 trillion with no accountability whatsoever, and nobody's talking about this. Ron Paul just introduced the bill, H.R. 1207, that is supposed to there's supposed to be a little more transparency for the Fed. What about this?
Well, it's true. The Fed programs are massive, and you hear a lot about the TARP program administered by Treasury. Partly that's just because there's more information available on it. What information is available on the Fed, we're tracking at Subsidyscope. They do release a weekly balance sheet every Thursday, and you can see the breakdown by category. Again, though, there are issues related to tracking money through these financial systems. Part of it has to do with the privacy of banks and investors that are involved in the system, and that's an issue across all of the bailout programs. Part of it is just that it's a really hard problem. So I wish I had a better answer for you, but you should come check out our work, and I think you'll see where we are and what questions you can ask your representative to improve the situation.
Has the Obama administration promised transparency when it comes to the Federal Reserve money that is going out to help the economy? Because as the caller said, it's trillion, close to $1 trillion.
I'm not aware of a specific directive aimed at the Federal Reserve by the administration. I will say that one of the new administration's first acts coming into office was to issue a memo saying that citizen involvement and transparency are going to be priorities. And we have seen moves in that direction across a lot of different parts of the government.
At SubsidyScope.com, then, how are you tracking, and where can viewers go on that website to find out how much the Federal Reserve is spending and where it's going?
Well, on the website, you can go to the Bailout project, and then within that, you should see a sidebar nav that includes an element for the Federal Reserve. What you'll see is what information is available, hopefully presented in an easier to understand format. That reflects the weekly balance sheet, and we also explain what the various things reflected on the balance sheet are. But it's not possible right now to say where that money is going exactly.
And we were showing you the bailout section of SubsidyScope.com on your screen, and if you on the side there you see a button called for Federal Reserve. If you click on that, you can see factors affecting the Federal Reserve balances and a layout here of the money. SubsidyScope.com. Next phone call, New York City. David on the Democrats line. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm just curious if any internet-based bottom-up efforts are being made with this project in regards to registering, for example, the various suppliers and service providers at the low end of the economic people who are going to take some of these monies, so they can register what they're going to request from the government, and then cross-checking that with the agencies that are going to be providing some of the money.
I think that type of granular detail is something that we're seeking. A lot of the ideas on the national dialogue that I referred to, run by the Recovery, Accountability, and Transparency Board, get toward that. And again, the Coalition for an Accountable Recovery has also asked for that kind of detail. It's going to be an ongoing process. There are existing systems in place on USAspending.gov that detail how agencies report information related to these sorts of expenditures. That project is based on an earlier one, which Sunlight co-sponsored, called FedSpending.org. USA Spending has added some additional layers of reporting since that government-sponsored or government-approved instantiation of a private project went underway, and we expect that the activity on recovery reporting is going to improve USA Spending further. So it's an iterative process. I think you're absolutely right to be calling for it to happen sooner rather than later. That's certainly what we would like to have happen. But it's going to probably take a while to get down to that level.
Richard joins us from Venice, Florida. You're on the air, Richard, with Tom Lee. Go ahead.
Good morning, Greta.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Lee. Yeah, tracking stimulus money, it's ridiculous. We can take the Department of Transportation. Recently there was an audit. In fact, it was on C-SPAN. And they took in revenues of about $42 billion from gasoline taxes and other sources. And they could only account for $7 billion in road building, bridge building, and associated structure. I think administrative costs out of the $42 billion was somewhere around $9 billion. And they actually loaned out some other money to other departments or agencies. And then the remainder, which was quite a bit, they couldn't account for it all.
Are you familiar with this situation?
I'm not sure that I can speak to it specifically. I will say that the way the Federal Highway Trust Fund works involves excess money going back into the fund to account for spending in years to come, or to cover previous years where a deficit run. I think that this is illustrative of the need for the ability to put a lot of eyes on the problem. The more transparency we have, the more detail is available, the more people like the caller can look for instances of waste, fraud, and abuse and help flag them. It's only going to improve the situation to have that kind of capability.
Is the administration linking on Recovery.gov accountability and transparency that is being done outside of the board that's in charge of this stimulus money, the GAO, the Inspector General, et cetera?
I don't know that they're linking to those specific pages. I bet you could find a link somewhere. One thing I will say is that they have a whole section for waste, fraud, and abuse where they list the resource at each agency that citizens should contact if they're aware of something that seems fishy. This is part of the CAR group's recommendations as well, is to have a system in place where users can flag suspicious-looking data and have it further investigated.
And is that comprehensive in your view? I mean, does it do enough to prevent or at least shine some light on waste, fraud, and abuse? Right
now, I don't think there is enough. Right now, what you've got is basically a list of phone numbers and email addresses. So if you have some information about what's going on in your particular area of expertise or your particular geographic area, you can get in touch with somebody who can look into it further. But you're not going to find anything on Recovery.gov right now that can help you identify such situations. It's possible that we will have that level of detail as they roll out these additional levels of reporting. But right now, it's really just a summary of what's going on. All
right, Milton in Jacksonville, Florida. Good morning.
Good morning. I'd like to thank C-SPAN for their program. It's very informative. Mr. Lee, it's nice of y'all to track the money, and I think it's an unprecedented excuse upon for the money be tracked like this. I know in the last administration we had a lot of problems with money being hid, such as the military budget. But what I like to see, and I think what the American people like to see, maybe you can answer the question, do you have any kind of way of tracking jobs as opposed to the amount of money that's going out?
That's a great question. Actually, yes, the plan for Recovery.gov is to include reporting measures on the specific number of jobs created. As you can imagine, this can be a pretty tricky question to answer, but it's definitely being paid attention to. The administration, I think, wants to come to the American people and say, look, we spent a lot of money, but we've saved this many jobs. So I would expect to see those kind of figures come in as we get further along in the process. The CAR group feels that that level of reporting doesn't go quite far enough. We'd like to see specific reporting for specific types of expenditures, like the number of road miles that are created using recovery funds, the number of schools that are repaired or built, the reduction in class sizes that are made possible by recovery funds, that kind of detail, which right now I don't think is in the works for Recovery.gov.
If you go to the website Recovery.gov and then you click on Impact, a tab at the top, you can see it on your screen right now, a breakdown state by state of estimated job effect of the stimulus money. So, for example, the state of Minnesota, 66,000 jobs created, saved, expected in the next 2 years. So you can go to your state and find out what to be looking out for. But there's no numbers right now that say, okay, this is how many jobs have been created thus far. Is that correct?
Right. And I think that's because the money, as you noted, is still going out. Those estimates are the best we have right now, but as more reporting comes back in, it's likely that you'll see those numbers refined and broken down into smaller parts, so you can really see where the money's gone and how many jobs it's created, county by county, ideally.
Okay, let's hear from Lewis in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Good morning.
Hi.
Go ahead, Lewis.
Mr. Lee, the Sunlight Foundation, there's a two-part question. The first question could be answered with a simple yes or no. Are you considered a lobbying group?
We have had a registered lobbyist in the past. So I think that you could say, yes, we do have various projects, the Open House Project and the Open Senate Project come to mind, where we try and interface with the folks in Washington and coordinate ways for them to open up what they're doing to the public.
You still there?
Yeah, the second part of the question is, who supplies your money? Who pays you? Where does the Sunlight Foundation get their funds?
Well, we believe in transparency. You can go to our website at SunlightFoundation.com and see every gift that we've received, over $250. Our primary funding comes from, to get us started, our co-founder, Mike Klein, provide some seed money. Since then, we've had a number of sponsors who I don't want to neglect any in particular, but we receive a lot of funding right now from the Omidyar Network, which is a foundation run by Pierre and Pamela Omidyar. Mr. Omidyar is one of the founders of eBay.
All right, one more phone call here from Huntington, New York. Michael on the Democrats line. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you very much for C-SPAN. My question is this. The banks, when they are given TARP money, and it's part of the stimulus in effect, they have the ability to loan out 33 times the amount of money that they are given, because that's the way that they work, which is incredible to me. I wonder, and my question is, how does that work as far as the national debt is concerned? When we borrow money for projects, we owe $1 for every dollar that we borrow. But when the banks are given money, they can increase that money by 33 times and then loan it out. How does that work? And how does that affect the money supply, which is, I think, the most important factor in the growth of the economy?
Well, I don't want to get myself into trouble trying to answer a finance question that's beyond my pay grade. But I think the concept of leverage doesn't start to affect the taxpayer until we get into a situation like the one we're in right now, where heavily leveraged transactions need to be guaranteed by the government, because the alternative could have serious economic consequences. So I would say that there's not a direct connection there, but limits on leverage, I think, are some of the things that are being considered as new regulations are envisioned for preventing the kind of situation we found ourselves in.
Tom Lee, what are you and the Sunlight Foundation looking out for when it comes to Recovery.gov and the stimulus money?
Well, as I said, the Coalition for Accountable Recovery has issued a memo detailing a lot of things we'd like to see on Recovery.gov. The Sunlight Foundation has also specifically participated in the National Dialogue.org site and asked for three things. One is bulk access to data. That means just direct access to whatever's reported back by the states and cities receiving funds, not just aggregate numbers, so that other people can really crunch those numbers and ensure that what we're seeing is what we think we're seeing. The second thing is for that to be exposed in open data formats. That is, I'll try to avoid getting too technical here, but basically we just want these to be in formats that can be used with non-proprietary, non-commercial tools so that anyone can start interacting with this data. And the third thing, which I alluded to before, is to have reporting mechanisms for when we see bad or suspicious data. We want people who have local expertise and can really drill down into this stuff to be able to get in touch with relevant parties who can either correct problems with the data or start looking into instances of waste and fraud.
Okay, one last phone call here before you
Sure.
go. From June in Belpre, Ohio, on Democrats line.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My question may not be relevant, but I'm wondering, in these stimulus package and where we bail out money, why does the government why are they allowed to run these companies and fire the CEOs and have to do with their financial status after they give the money into these companies?
Is that something that you can figure out? It's not related to the stimulus money, but when it comes to, is that something the Sunlight Foundation is tracking when it comes to the government's role in Chrysler and possibly GM, the breakdown of how much the government owns and what that means?
Well, certainly at Subsidy scope, you can see what the size of the government's investment in these companies is. I think the caller is trying to get at how the government is entitled to run these companies, and I wouldn't want to speak for them. I do think that there's an interesting effect you can see on Subsidy scope, where various recipients of TARP money are now trying to give it back because they don't want to be subject to the restrictions on executive compensation and other things that have been, these strings have been added to the money after it was initially taken. So it's interesting to see these organizations try and back out of the money they were getting from the government.
All right, Tom Lee with the Sunlight Foundation. Thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks for having me.
And up next, we're going to talk about